Hey everybody, same thing as usual. If you have any questions for me, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I will start in 3 minutes talking about the couple things I want to go over. Specifically, it's going to be going over the group discussions for today, or for this week, I should say. So if you have questions about either the group discussions or anything else, throw that in the chat, and I will get to those in the order that they come in. Otherwise, in another 2 to 3 minutes, I will start talking about our group discussions for this week, exactly how those work. A little bit more designed for the groups that have one to run, but I'll make sure I go over it for those of you who just have to reply to the classmates too. That's one more minute and I will get started chatting about things. All right. All right, so let's chat a little bit about this week and any questions that you guys might have. It looks like we have a pretty small live stream for today, which is fine. I'm also going to be doing this at 1:30, so that might be where a lot of people end up stopping by. With this weather, who knows? I already know some people near me who have lost power, so wouldn't be all too surprising if this storm ends up impacting us a little bit too. So I want to talk about how this week will run. I'm going to go through every single part of how this week is going to run. By the end of today, hopefully, and by the end of this live stream, if you're here, every question that you might have should be answered. Every question you might have about our group discussion should be answered by the time we're through this live stream. So if you still have questions after this, we can schedule a Zoom or a phone call or something like that. Depending on what your questions are after this, it might not be something that is easy to approach through email. So hopefully people take advantage of this live stream. I'll have this available on YouTube, and I'm going to end up just directing some people to this live stream as well. In the folder for this week, in that module, you have a lot of information with instructions for this week, including a video of me talking you through everything that's going on. In the live stream today, I'm going to go into more detail and answer questions about that. But that is a great place to start if you haven't already looked in that folder and looked at that video for the instructions for exactly how this is going to work. This is going to be a little different than what is in the syllabus, simply because we are online now, and that's something obviously couldn't have been anticipated at the beginning of the course. For this week, there is a few different things that we are going to do, specifically based off of if you are in a group that's presenting or if you're not. If you already in the class before we went online, if you already did a group discussion on your article, then you are not presenting this week. So if you are in any group aside from memory or social, or if you are in the section 36 class that meets on Mondays, then you also have the discussion for development this week as well. My other classes already had the development discussion. Those groups are presenting this week. Very quickly, I'm going to start by going over the groups that the people who do not have a discussion to do, simply because that is going to be very quick to go over. If you don't have a discussion going on, what you have to do this week is you have to reply to good morning, Carmen. You have to reply to 2 classmates' posts in each group that is presenting. So what that means is you are replying to 2 classmates that are in the memory group, as well as 2 classmates that are in the social group. If you're in the Monday class, then also 2 from the development group. So if you are not in the group presenting, your work this week, you have more total posts than you've had to do last week and when we do these discussion boards, but you don't have to do that 250-word main post. So in essence, that means you're probably doing about the same, maybe even slightly less work this week. That's if you're not in one of the groups that are presenting. So it's not just 2 though. Last week you only had to reply to 2. This week you have to reply to 2 in each group. So that means you are replying to 4 if you only have the memory and social group going on, but you're replying to 6 in that one class that has the development group going on. Now those replies have to be in by the end of the week. I will ask that you put those replies in earlier than on Friday. So what I'm going to ask that you do is today, you probably won't see those questions up until very late. Most of the groups have emailed me a PowerPoint, but not necessarily their discussion questions yet. Once I receive all of that, I will post all of that. But let's go with the plan that you won't see that information posted until tomorrow morning. So if you are just replying to other classmates, then you are going to have to reply to two classmates' discussion questions in each one of those groups. That let's go with the assumption you could do that anytime tomorrow on for the rest of the week. Now, I will ask that you make your replies Tuesday or Wednesday for this week. It's not that you're going to be marked down if you don't, but it will make things run a lot better if you can make those replies Tuesday or Wednesday. Even if you make them on Thursday, it would theoretically be okay. But that way you're going to give the groups that are going enough time that they can go in and they can answer the questions that they have. You have to make that post by Friday end of day. I won't mark you down if they come in on Friday. I will ask that you do them ideally on Tuesday or Thursday so we leave plenty of time for the groups that are presenting to go and answer those questions. If you are not presenting this week, so you already were in a group that ran your presentation, that's your responsibility for this week. 2 responses to two different discussion questions in each group that is presenting. Memory and social, and if you're in the Monday class, development. So it's 4 For most of you, 6 for a couple of you. Make sure you're applying to 2 different discussion questions. Those discussion questions are going to be easy to see. I will write down this is this person's discussion question and create the forum for it. Now let me go over, and this is going to take about 10 minutes to go over. Let me go over those of you who are presenting this week. And then I'm going to answer any questions that you might have. So if you were presenting this week, if you were in the social or memory group, or in the Monday class, you're in the development group, here's what you're doing. The first thing that you need to do is you need to message me your PowerPoint or paper. Every group so far has given me a PowerPoint, but you still can submit a paper if you didn't do a PowerPoint and want to do a PowerPoint. If you do a PowerPoint, just give me the link to the PowerPoint. If you did a paper, a link to that paper. If you did a paper, 2 to 3 pages, so it should be half of a page for each person in your group contributing. I will post your PowerPoint or paper as the discussion question for the week. So I need to have the PowerPoint or paper from you by end of day today, Monday. When I receive all of them for the group, and if they're getting too late, I'm not going to wait, but I want to ideally post them all together. But if I don't get them, until past my bedtime, so if they're coming in after 10 o'clock, I'll just post what I have. I will post everything later tonight that I receive. You have to get it to me by end of day, so if it gets there at like 11:59, it's still on time. I just won't end up posting that until Tuesday morning. You have to submit to me that PowerPoint or paper. That's number 1. That's due today. I will post that for everyone to see. It'll be posted as the discussion question for the week. And all you're going to have to do is read through that PowerPoint, read through that paper if you are if you're not in that group. You should already be taking a look at the articles, like I always say, but only 10 minutes. I'm only asking you to skim through the articles, not be an expert on the articles unless you're presenting on it. Next, you need to give me 1 discussion question per person in your group. So if you have a group of 5, I'm going to need 5 discussion questions. What has appeared to be the easiest is just having 1 person email me all 5 of those discussion questions then, with the person's name that created each discussion question. But you only need 1. When we were doing this in the classroom, everyone was doing 2, because we would get through those questions and you might see some that just don't work. For this, because we're going to have them as discussion questions on the forum, I'm only going to ask that you give me 1 question each. So that way we'll probably have 5 total options for groups to reply to. That also is due tonight, Monday, by end of day. Easiest way is probably having 1 person in your group email me everyone's question, but there's nothing wrong, and one of the groups did it this way. There's nothing wrong if you have each person in the group email me their specific question. I had one of the groups do that, but the other groups that have been in contact with me so far have all done it emailing me all of the group's questions, and that seems to be a little easier, for at least from my eyes. I need those questions as well by tonight. I will post those later on tonight into tomorrow morning, right when I wake up. So you have deadlines, if you are in the groups presenting, of tonight. All of your upfront work needs to be done by tonight. Upfront work means your PowerPoint, your paper about what the article was about, as well as the discussion questions that you're going to moderate. All that's due by tonight. I'll have that posted for everyone else. Then everyone else has to reply to your discussion questions. And if it's your discussion question, if it's the one you created, you are responsible for moderating that forum. That means that you are going to reply back to everyone who answers your question. When you reply back, I'm asking for more than 1 sentence. 2 to 3 sentences is fine, but you should be adding something there. So you should be reading their response and saying, oh, this is something that seems to agree with someone else that replied. Or it seems like you and this other person that replied have opposite views. You can see their reply and add something specific from the article. Like, yeah, they saw that in their methodology. They actually accounted for that or something like that, whatever might make sense. Um, you're answering their question by adding something to it. That's all you're doing for the rest of the way. You have to do that for your specific one question. That's why I asked at the beginning of this for everyone to reply to those questions Tuesday or Wednesday, because then that'll leave you Thursday and Friday to answer those questions. Inevitably, like I had said, I'm not going to mark people late if they don't get those posts in until Thursday or Friday. So you still are going to need to, if you're in the group, check back on Friday. Now, if someone doesn't get their reply in until late on Friday and you don't see that one on Friday and you reply to it over the weekend, that's fine. So for this forum, I won't even look at these forums for grading purposes until Monday morning of next week. So if you have to reply, but they should be done by Friday. If there's a late post that you reply to on Saturday, that's fine. Even if you did it Monday morning, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But that should only be for posts that were made on Friday. If there's a post that was made at like 11 p.m. on Wednesday and you didn't reply to it, then that would be a problem. But if there's a post that was made at like 6 p.m. on Friday and you didn't get to that until Sunday night or even Monday morning would be okay. That's okay. I mean, that's everything came in late. That's where I'll be understanding. All you have to do is moderate your one forum. So let's break this down with some logic of math. Every person in the class has to reply to 2 of your discussion questions in your group. Let's say you have 5 questions in your group. Let's say that there are, realistically, let's say there's 25 in each class, because each class is a little bit different in size and some people aren't necessarily participating as actively as others, but let's say 25. There's 5 in your group, so that means there's 20 students that are not in your group that are going to be replying to 2 questions each. That means there's 20 replying to 2 each is 40 total replies to 5 questions. So that means that about the average person should have about 8 replies. Let's say your question wasn't as popular. Let's say your question only had 3 or 4 replies to it. And let's say someone else in your group had a very popular one and they had 15. You could be a good team member and help to answer some of those questions that they received. And I would count your replies, since you're in the group, as replies to their question. So it would make their work a little easier if you were helping them out. Now, that's the teamwork of this, and it's too hard for me to require that. So I will encourage you to be a good group member if you see that happen. Hopefully, most of every question will have thereabouts of, let's say between like 7 and 10 replies, so that won't be necessary. But just in case, you could be a good team member by helping your group member out there. If you were in the memory group, you have one last responsibility. So if you're in the memory group, if you're in any group, but I'm going to use memory just as the example. You're in the memory group. So today, you get me your PowerPoint. Today, you get me your discussion question. All of that goes up. Throughout the week, you are moderating your one discussion question. You know how to do all of that. You have one last responsibility. You still have to reply to 2 classmates' posts in the other group presented. So in the social group for most of you. Or if you're in that Monday class, then you still have to reply to 2 in the social group and 2 in the development group, and then maintain your forum. So if you're in a group that's presenting, you definitely have more work to do this week than the average week, but that's because you have a presentation going. So what that'll mean is you actually have 2 different grades this week. You have the grade for your presentation, as well as the grade for the discussion this week. The grade for the discussion this week is just replying to questions, 2 questions on each forum. And you're going to automatically get that for the memory forum if you're in the memory group or whatever group you're in. Everyone else only has 1 grade, so that's why you have more work to do. Okay. If you have questions about anything, let me know. Let's answer that, because the big thing I want is by the end of the stream, everyone to feel comfortable with what they're doing this week, especially the groups that are presenting, because the groups that are presenting have a due date of later today. Now, the last thing I will mention in a second, I want to get to Sora. I see you asked a question. I haven't read it. Let me read through that in 1 second. The last thing I want to say is if you have a group where someone's just not participating, I will talk about that in just 1 second as well. hopefully I just mentioned that. So if you're in the development group for the Monday class, you still have to reply to 2 questions from the social group and 2 from the memory group. So that's going to be, if you're in the development group, your entire grade for the discussion board this week will be those replies. That's 5.5% of your final grade. Your presentation, which I think is 10% if I remember off the top of my head, that all comes from your development group. The PowerPoint, the discussion question that you're asked, and that you moderate your forum. That 10% of your grade is completely from your forum, but you still have the 5% for this week of answering questions in the social group and the memory group. So you'll have to reply 2 in the social group, 2 in the memory group, so 4 total, and then do everything for your development group. So this does end up, for the groups that are presenting, for sure, a busier week, but you have 2 grades this week. Perfect. Okay, last thing that I want to mention, hopefully this doesn't apply to very many of you, but certainly I think from what I've seen over the weekend with emails, that there's some groups that are seeing some people not reply, not participating. I want to take a minute to actually talk about that. So the bottom line is, with everything switching online, things got chaotic. As you know, the school extended the withdrawal dates for everyone just in case they weren't able to adapt to being able to take that class online. Some people are taking advantage of that. That date's still not passed. So some students might still be, you could see their email address in the class, but they might have the intention of withdrawing. I don't know for sure who is who. So I can't go with the assumption, oh, they're not in the class anymore if they're in your group. But if they're not participating at all, if they're not answering questions, if they're not contributing, there's a very good chance that's going to be what they're going to choose to do. They also have the option of taking this class, and every one of you have the option of taking your classes pass-fail. So that doesn't make sense for them to skip an assignment that's a large part of their grade. They probably then are, let's be blunt, they're not going to pass the class. However, there is a whole lot up in the air. And the negative of that is it very much means that I am sure most groups at least are dealing with someone participating less than others. And truthfully, you have to kind of use your own judgment on that part of things. But here's what this means. So everyone for this presentation now is going to be, in essence, pretty much graded the same way. The discussion questions are completely done individually. You have your one that you have to moderate, no matter what. So there's no option to do that together. The togetherness part of that grade is if you do help out your teammate and reply to one of the questions asked on their forum, I'll still count it for them. That's completely optional. The PowerPoint that I get, I'm going to grade everyone together for that PowerPoint that's contributed to that PowerPoint. So what that means is, what I'm asking from those groups, and so many of these groups I've been in contact about this with already. If your group has, let's say, 5 in the group, but only 3 of you have added slides to the PowerPoint, just have the 3 that added the slides to the PowerPoint all confirm that happened. And then if the other 2 people want to give credit for that part of the assignment, they can send me their own paper or PowerPoint. That I'm not going to sit there and say, be patient for those who haven't contributed. They have until the end of the day. No, that's ridiculous. If they haven't contributed yet, at that point, send me your work with just the 3 of you or whatever it is. Just have all 3 of you email me to confirm the story. And then the other 2 could still submit. They just have to submit it on their own. Don't wait anymore. If you're at the point where you're still waiting for someone to reply and they were supposed to reply by, let's say, Sunday, just email me everything now. They've had long enough. If you set a deadline for, let's say, 5 o'clock tonight, if you want to wait for that deadline, that's all, by all means, that's fine. But what I will ask from you all is everyone in the group that contributed to email me and confirm that, let's say these 3 people contributed and these 2 didn't. And that way I have that story. So for that part of their grade, I'm not going to give them credit for the PowerPoint unless they submit something to me separately. That only applies if your group wasn't working too well. Most of the groups that this was going to apply to, that one person or that isn't participating, isn't going to participate for the entirety of this assignment because they might be considering dropping the class. But I'm not going to assume that. So I don't want you to just say, all right, they're not in my group. But if they haven't replied, don't wait for them. They can send me things individually and I can always add them separately. They'll still be on your forum. So they'll still have a discussion question on your forum. But you don't have to work together anymore. This could be an entirely individual assignment at that point in time for them. The only thing that I'm grading at all together anyways is that PowerPoint or paper that you submit. And if everyone submitted their own paper, that's fine. I would grade everyone separately, but it's just less work if you were putting the slides together. So for those who are working together, continue that way. But if you are waiting now for someone, don't keep waiting. That's the big thing that I would have to say there. Okay. Do you all have any questions? Let me see if I have any questions through email because I know a couple people might not be able to chat here. Okay, perfect. You're welcome, Michael. So Keith, so for the personality assignment that's not this week, it's next week. The self-solve concept, what you're doing is the starting point to that assignment is a very common self-help exercise that you might get if you would be meeting with a counselor or a therapist. A lot of times when someone would sit down and they're struggling, but they can't really place what they're struggling with. A lot of times that starts to signal that we're losing track of our self versus our self-concept. So a very common exercise is exactly what I'm asking you all to do for that week. So this, again, is not this week, it's next week. You're going to answer the question, I am ... You're going to answer it as many times as you can. Now, I would say try to be more specific to your interest, to who you are, your personality traits, than just saying, I'm a student, I'm male, things like that. But something like, I'm a musician, yeah, but maybe what type of instrument you play. That all is up to you. I'm a musician still answers that question. I'm a drummer might be a little bit more specific to that question. You might even have multiple answers that relate to being a musician in that sense. But what I want you to do when you're doing this activity, you really need to dedicate like a half an hour for the activity itself, because what most of you will have happen is you will have some stages that happen in this activity. First stage is right when you start, you probably will struggle to think of some things because it's a weird exercise to do. But then you'll have things start popping in your head and you're going to write those down. But I want you to write those down as soon as they pop into your head. I don't want you to evaluate them, meaning I don't want you to have something pop in your head, then stop and think, well, am I that? That I want you to do after everything's written down on the paper. So as soon as something pops in your head, you write it down. Eventually, most of you will get to a point, maybe you have 10 things down, 15 things down, maybe you only have 3 or 4. And you'll eventually get to some writer's block where you just say, I can't think of anything more. And that's the part that you have to power through. That part's going to take a while. For some of you, it might take 20 minutes. For some, it might be 2 or 3 to get through. But then some more things will start to come to your mind. After you write down that list, and like I said, 20 or more things, after that list is done, go back and go through that list one item at a time. And now you're going to evaluate them. Now you're going to say, okay, I see I wrote down that I'm a drummer. Is this something that I really care about? Is this something that I really am? Is this just something that I think I am? What you're going to likely see is the things that you wrote down early are probably going to be things that you both think that you are and that you really are. But as you scroll down that list, you're going to probably get to some things that you wrote them down. And as soon as you start evaluating them, you say, yeah, but I don't really care about this. So it's something that you think you are because that's why it would pop into your mind, but maybe not something that you really are, that you really care about that you are. And something like that works really well. It starts to identify there's parts of ourself and our self-concept Those things that we think we are part of our self-concept. We all have things that we don't necessarily care that we are, even though we think that we are. Those things tend to be things that we are good at, specifically things that we get positive regard for. They tend to be the things that we have some talent at, that we have some skill at, even though we might not care. So if I play the piano growing up, and I'm good at playing the piano growing up, my mother made me take piano lessons. I never cared about playing the piano necessarily, but my mother made me take the lessons, and I was good at it. So later on in life, I might still play the piano. But as I think about it, I might think about playing the piano. I might say, well, I never really liked it, never cared that much about it. So it might be a part of who I think I am simply because I'm good at it. Because the extra thing about things that we're good at is that people give us pats on the back for the things that we're good at. Those pats on the back are important to our psyche. They help, they make us feel better. As much as I love singing, I'm not a good singer. No one says to me, oh, you're such a good singer. No, people say, hey, who sings that? Let's keep it that way. So no one gives me that pat on the back. So while I might really like to sing, that's not something I think that I am as a singer because I don't get that pat on the back. So that's the opposite side of this activity. There are things that deep down we care about, but we don't consciously think of those things necessarily because we won't get the pat on the back. So we can help to self-actualize using the end of the PowerPoint. We can help self-actualizing by those things, which is really important. But we all have to balance our own self-actualization with the need for positive regard and the demands to get positive regard. The problem becomes the things that we need for positive regard end up in our conscious mind. The things that we need to help self-actualize, they tend to be in our unconscious mind. So when those two things overlap, we're great. But some of those things won't overlap. So some of those things we won't be aware of. That can end up becoming a really big issue because if you've ever gotten to the point ever in your life when you would use the expression when it rains it pours, where it seems like everything that can go wrong is now starting to go wrong, well, that's why. When those things start to not overlap, when we don't have congruence between ourself and our self-concept, picture two rubber bands that are interlocking and you can stretch them really far. You can stretch them really far and then let go and they go back to normal. But if you stretch them just that extra inch too far that they snap, now they can't go back to normal. We need help to have them go back to normal. When we get to that expression of when it rains, it pours, it's not that more is going wrong than otherwise goes wrong on other days. It's that we're noticing the things that are going wrong much more so than we otherwise did. Normally, we sweep bad things under the rug. You get cut off driving home, you sweep it under the rug. You give it maybe a moment's thought. If you're anything like me with road rage, probably about a couple minutes, but eventually you let it go. When we get to this part of the self and self-concept being incongruent, we struggle to let those things go. That ends up causing us to have a lot of problems with our psyche. The end result of that, which is from the PowerPoints, is we'll focus more on things that we think we are, not things that we actually are. But the thing is, if all I'm doing is something I think I am, but I'm not actually that thing, I'm not actually helping myself. I think I'm helping myself, but I'm not really helping myself. So we need some overlap there. Otherwise, we're working towards those things and it's just not working. I can break that down a little bit more if you want as well. If it doesn't look like anyone else has any other questions, so maybe I'll go into another minute or two of detail about that. But write any questions that you might have, especially about the group discussion assignment. So the bottom line is when we're looking at the self and the self-concept, or specifically self-actualization and positive regard, the bottom line is we all have things that we get positive regard for. I'm going to simplify that tremendously and say we have things that we're good at and things that we're not good at. The one extra thing that's important here, though, when I say good and not good, you have to understand that not good involves not just bad, but things that we're just okay at. So there's a lot more in that second cell than in that first cell. We all have things that we're good at, but we have a lot more things that we're both just okay and bad at. And both of those go in the same cell. Then for self-actualization, we self-actualize by doing things that we actually like to do. So if you love singing, but you're not a good singer, well, you're self-actualizing for this. Great example for me is I loved playing football when I was younger. I was not a good football player. I was good enough to make varsity and then to sit on the bench and keep it nice and warm. So no one was ever giving me positive regard for playing. No one was ever saying, "Oh, good job out there," because I was never on the field. But I loved playing football. Some of my best memories were being on the football team. So that's something I was self-actualizing for. And the whole idea of practice makes perfect. The idea of me playing more is going to help. Sure, that helps with self-actualization as well. But the bottom line is, we all have things for self-actualization that we like to do and that we don't like to do. Now, again, like to do is less than don't like, because don't like are things that we hate and are indifferent to. So there's less that we like, just like there's less that we're not good at compared to that we're good at. So the end result is you have 4 possible outcomes here. You have things that you like to do and that you're good at doing. So that little cell right here, very simply, that is our happy place. When you do this exercise on the self-concept, the first few things that you write are probably going to be in your happy place, things that you like to do that you're good at doing. We're going to do them as much as we possibly can. But the big extra thing here is that the things that are in that cell, there aren't enough things in that cell to only do those things in our lives. Because there's less in the good than there is in the not good. And there's less in the like than there is in the not like. So that cell in the happy place, yeah, that's what we're going to do as much as we can, but there's not enough to only do those. Now, on the other extreme, there is a lot more that we have that we are not good at doing and don't like doing. Because in that cell, when we have the good and like, and we have this little cell here, well, there's a lot more in not good and there's a lot more in not like. So that cell on the bottom right there, that cell is going to be pretty big. But the thing is, if we aren't good at doing something, we don't like doing it either, why would we do it? Those things we're only going to do when the world demands us to do them. Not anymore. Give you an example. I tried sewing once when I was younger. I took home ec when I was in high school and we had to sew, and I was not good at it, and I did not like sewing either. I sewed the button to my finger. Now, what I learned from that is that I am not good at it and I hate doing it. So I'm never going to do it. I'll throw out a shirt if I lose a button before I will try to sew that button back on. Those things we're just never going to do. So we have the 2 cells where they overlap. Good and like doing it, happy place. We're doing it as much as we can. Not good at doing it and don't like doing it. We're never doing those things ever in our lives unless the world makes us. Now we have those last 2 options. Things that we are good at doing that we don't like to do. Things that we like to do that we're not good at doing. And that's when the demands of the self-actualization and positive regard, or the self and self-concept, just don't overlap. Things that we like to do, but we're not good at doing, those things will help us self-actualize. Playing football for me. Loved playing football, but wasn't good at it. So that helps me self-actualize, but I never will get positive regard. I'm not going to get the pat on the back for doing it because I'm not good at it. So I'm getting self-actualization, I'm not getting positive regard. So all that can do is help who I really am, but it's not going to help who I think I am. Other extreme, we have things that we are good at doing, but we don't like doing them. We don't care. We're indifferent or dislike doing them, but we're good at doing them. Well, the thing is, I get pats on the back for doing those, and we've all had bad days before in our lives. When we're having a bad day, sometimes we just need that pat on the back. I doubt there's anyone in this room who has not had a bad day at some point and fished for a compliment. Because we need those things. We get our identity. We get things from other people and their approval, respect, and praise. So sometimes we will compromise self-actualizing so that we get that pat on the back, positive regard. We get that by doing things that we're good at doing, even if we don't necessarily like doing them. How it relates to the homework for personality is when we're having bad days, well, we need that pat on the back. So we're more and more likely to sacrifice who we really are in ourself for the demands of our self-concept and the betterment of our self-concept. The more that we do that, the more likely we are to do that more. If we keep doing it, then those rubber bands, they're stretching. We're fine as long as we don't stretch them just that little bit too far. Or if you prefer the metaphor, we can keep sweeping things under the rug until there's no more room. Keep stuffing things into the closet until there's just no more room in the closet. One last metaphor I can give you is a tea kettle. As you heat it up, steam builds and builds and builds. Eventually, there's nowhere for the steam to go but to shoot out. All of that causes the problem of when it rains, it pours. Now, we can help each other ourselves. We don't need to go to a professional for that. But the thing is, a counselor, a therapist, a professional is trained to help us with that. The last point that I'll make, and this is actually, I am happy to talk about this because this is one of, when we're in the classroom, this is one of the two really important, like, kind of takeaways I like to give for the class. So this one I think is actually a really important point. Sorry. We all can do this ourselves. We're all able to be a therapist ourselves. What a therapist does, if you're looking at the PowerPoint on the very last slides, is they give something called positive regard unconditionally. So unconditional positive regard. And that just means that I give you that pat on the back. I give you respect and acceptance, no matter what you say. So here's the thing. We can do that as humans. We can do that for our friends, but we don't do that normally for our friends. If you think about your own lives, you probably only give positive regard when people meet those conditions. They're called conditions of worth. You give that person acceptance, respect, praise, approval when they're worthy of it. So you give them for when they do something that they're good at. That great singer, you say, wow, you're a great singer. But you don't do it for someone who's not. Well, here's the thing. We're all capable of doing it unconditionally, but we don't do it unconditionally except under one circumstance. When we recognize that someone we care about needs it, when they are desperate for it, we are able to do it unconditionally. Think about that for a second. Maybe some of you can picture this example. You have a friend who just got dumped, and they are a mess, and they come to you as a mess. Well, what do we do in that moment? Now, first things first, you probably start to match their emotion a little bit. So they're really sad, and you probably are getting more accepting and sadder and shrinking a little bit. That's called empathic understanding. And we actually do that as human beings. Some of us do it very, very well naturally. So the second thing that you do, though, is you probably say all these cliched things. It's their loss, not yours. They're never going to find someone as good as you. You're going to find someone better in no time at all. But think about that for a second, because if you can picture this situation, maybe that's what you were really thinking, but maybe not. You might be saying that because they're your friend and you know they need it, but you might not be really thinking it. Deep down, you might be listening to this person. They're a mess. They're a wreck. They just got dumped. And you're sitting there thinking, of course they dumped you. You cheated on them, you dumb bitch. But that's not what you say to them. Because you care about them, because they're your friend, you give them your acceptance. That's what a therapist is trained to do, but we can all do that as human beings. We're all capable of it. The thing is, we only do that when we recognize this person is desperate for it. They need it. There's nothing that says we can't do it in those other times, but we don't naturally do it at those other times. So here's the thing. Why can't we? Why don't we just do it at those other times? So the one big takeaway that I would give you, one of the two for the class, and the other one I'm going to do on a live stream towards the end of the semester. One important takeaway I'd have for you. You want to help your own mental health. You want to help your psyche. You want to make yourself a better person. Have someone that you really care about and talk about real things with them. But here's the thing, and this is so important, and I know from so much life experience that people always take this for granted. They always hear this, and I'm going to say it to you now, and you're going to say, oh, it's no big deal. We don't need to really do that. If you just say, I'm here when you need to talk, it's not enough. People won't take advantage of that. You need to schedule that time to talk. You have to say, hey, every Wednesday we're going to have dinner together, and we're going to talk about the things really going on in our lives. And every Wednesday, that's what you do. If you don't schedule that, then people will go to you maybe when they need it, but they're not going to go to you until they get to a certain point of need. It might not be to the point of need of they're desperate for it, but it's not going to be as early as you can get the help for it. If you start talking about those things really bothering you earlier, we can all be our own therapists. We can all help one another. The thing is, we're only built to do this when someone is desperate for it. So if we're going to do this earlier, we need a plan of how to do it. And we're absolutely capable of doing it. But if you don't schedule that in, it might work for a week and then it's going to stop. You might work once or twice. Eventually, it's just not going to continue to happen. You can just schedule that in. It doesn't have to be once a week, it can be once a month. But you need to schedule that if you want it to really, really work. But otherwise, I'll always encourage to everyone, talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist. It doesn't matter if you have the healthiest psyche in the world. Talking to a therapist is only going to help. Using what's on the PowerPoints as that example, our self and self-concept are never perfectly congruent. So if this circle is our self and this circle is our self-concept, they're never going to be one on top of one another. That looks so terrible in the they're never going to be perfectly on top of one another. It's not designed to work that way. So even if you have a healthy psyche and you talk to a therapist, all talking to a therapist does is it brings those things a little closer together. We always can do that because no one's going to have a perfectly overlapping self and self-concept. But even someone who doesn't have a care in the world benefits from talking to a counselor, talking to a therapist, just talking to a loved one about real things. We all get better from doing that. That's why the one thing I'd say to anyone who ever would ask me, how do I choose a therapist? The first thing when you're choosing a counselor, the first thing is ask that person that you would be considering going to talk to, ask that person when the last time they went through therapy themselves was. Because if they say anything relating to I've never done it before or not in a long time, I just haven't had the need, they're not buying their own craft. Don't talk to that person. Okay. That's all I have to go into for today, unless you guys have any questions. But if you do, make sure you throw them in the chat, especially if it relates to those group discussions. I want to make sure everybody is comfortable and confident on that assignment moving forward for this week. Okay, looks like those are for them. You're very welcome, Katrina. Enjoy the Italian, Michael. So yeah, if you guys don't have any other questions, we can finish up right here. And I'll see if you guys want to come back to the 1:30 live stream that I'll have. I'm going to have another one from 1:30 to 2:30 talking about the group discussion assignment. I doubt we're going to go into personality unless someone has a question about it. But if you still have questions and you just want to hear me talk about it again, stop by at 1:30. Otherwise, I will have my next one for you guys later on this week, and I'll see you then. You're welcome, Sora. I think I did. Oh yeah, I definitely did. Sounds good. See you then. Also, at like 1:35, Katrina, is when I'm going to start talking. I always give 5 minutes for people to trickle in. I think I'm going to end the stream from here. It looks like pretty much everyone left the room. Whoever is still here, shoot me an email if you have any questions, but I'm going to go with the assumption that whoever's still here is just like idle in here. All right. See you guys at 1:30 if you want to chat a little bit more.